The first African-American composer and conductor to conduct a professional symphony orchestra in the U.S., William Grant Still, Jr., was born May 11, 1895, in Woodville, Mississippi. The town depicted here was only his birthplace. Luckily, he did not grow up here. Instead, his mother and grandmother took him to live in Little Rock, Arkansas, to raise him. A not-so-fun fact about this town is that it is also the birthplace of not only William Grant Still, Jr., but Jefferson Davis. That name may sound familiar because that is the first and only president of the Confederacy. This was not a very friendly area. The move to Little Rock, Arkansas was sparked by the death of William Grant Still, Sr. This happened only 3 months after Jr.'s birth, and the death was to unknown causes. I can't find how he died anywhere on the internet, which I find a little suspicious. However, after they moved to Little Rock, Arkansas, his mother remarried to a great man named Charles B. Shepperson. It's clear to musicologists where William Grant Still, Jr. got his musical influences. Charles B. Shepperson, his stepfather, and his grandmother, Anne Fambrough, were those great influences. His stepfather ingrained a love of European classical music by taking him to operettas and buying him recordings of classical music. Meanwhile, his grandmother would sing him African-American spirituals, both of which you can hear in his compositions. At the age of 15, he started playing music rather later than most of his composer counterparts. However, he's not like many others, because soon after he started playing the violin, he learned most of the instrumentation of an entire orchestra, and then proceeded to graduate as the class valedictorian at the age of 16. He was a rather impressive young man, and that didn't change throughout his life. After a short stint at Wilberforce University, Still decided that med school wasn't for him and that he wasn't going to follow his mother's advice, and went on to Oberlin Conservatory of Music. However, he found that the financial obligations were rather high and wasn't able to study composition until a professor by the name of Professor Lehman asked why he wasn't studying composition. And when he told him that he couldn't pay for it, Lehman taught him without charge. This was probably the best decision of Professor Lehman's life. After graduating from Oberlin, Mr. Still went on to be the first African-American to have a symphony performed by a leading orchestra, the first to have an opera performed by a major opera company, and the first to have an opera performed on national television. As well, he wrote quite a number one hit, the Afro-American Symphony, one of my favorite works, which was for 20 years the most widely performed symphony composed by an American. All of these great achievements culminated together to earn him the title of the Dean of African American Composers, something that has stuck with him long after his death in 1978 in Los Angeles, California. He was truly a great man, and we need to move on to the next person. The next person I'd like to cover is someone who is somehow even more prolific in his writing, Duke Ellington. Originally born to the name Edward Kennedy Ellington in 1899 in Washington, D.C. He was a pianist, and a great black art music composer, and innovator in big band style. Duke Ellington wrote thousands of scores and created such a distinct sound. Duke Ellington is considered by many the greatest American composer of all time, and also one of the most influential American composers of all time. And I would have to agree, he is my absolute favorite. He was born to the original name Edward Kennedy Ellington in 1899 in Washington, D.C., to a middle-class family, and he was encouraged to go into his interests like the fine arts, and especially piano. He then became completely engrossed in becoming a master at piano. He was awarded, but did not accept, a scholarship to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. And rather than do that, he started to perform professionally at the age of 17. After having been playing piano for 10 years, he was already quite impressive. He started out in New York City in 1923, and he had moved to Broadway nightclubs. In these clubs, he started to gain quite a reputation as an amazing performer, and attracted many other great musicians to come and play with him. At first, it turned into a sextet, and then from a sextet into a 10-piece ensemble, and then to a good-sized band, 14 musicians, and then it kept expanding and expanding and expanding until he had a full thing for his compositional. Eventually, even with how selective he was for individuals with very, very specific expressional styles and very different ways of playing, he became one of the originators of big band black art music, which was very, very significant, as this remained the style for a very, very large time with horn bands. Big bands made appearances in rock and pop and every other genre, and still do. Duke Ellington's influence goes long past black art music and into every other American genre. Horn bands sit in big band style in pop, rock bands of all kinds, hip-hop, and into every other American genre of music. And by extension, his influence goes from America into the rest of the West and into many of the other developed nations of the world. However, not all good things can last forever, and though he had such an amazing mastery of rhythm, compositional form, music in general, some things have to pass, and he died 4 years earlier than William Grant Still Jr. in 1974 in New York, New York. No matter what the genre, African Americans have just as much influence on music as white Americans. Despite their lower numbers, their affinity for music is unparalleled by any other group of people, and studying this has done nothing but amaze me and build me up more. I got most of my information from Encyclopedia Britannica and the rest from HelloMusicTheory.com. Thank you.